The road to Last Epoch's launch was a ludicrous one, a path so unbelievable you'll need to hear it to believe it. This is a project bred in a niche, whittling away genre of the gaming industry, crafted by lovers of the classic Diablo 2 and veterans of relatively newer kids on the block like Path of Exile 1. It also all began with a post begging for like-minded people to join a startup team to develop an awesome new ARPG. It's not a little-known secret the isometric ARPG genre was on its last legs there for a bit, with very little innovation outside of grinding gear games and Path of Exile. Sure, Diablo 3 kept chugging along with new seasons for quite a while, but its community almost unwaveringly agrees only its final few new seasons were actually quality. Then there was the broader release of Lost Ark to the west, but we all know that's an MMORPG in ARPG clothing, also fully robed in pay-to-win garbage. Very few people entrenched in ARPGs seek to pay real money to improve their character. They'd rather do that by grinding away their 20s and 30s, and maybe even 40s, playing an awesome video game. No shade here in the slightest. Smaller, cooler ARPGs may have released between Path of Exile 1's massive launch in 2013 and now, games like Torchlight Infinite, Grim Dawn, Wolcen Lords of Madness, Titan Quest, and more. But none impacted the ARPG genre quite like Last Epoch is going to, and already has. This ambitious ARPG is releasing on the heels of Diablo 4's absolutely gargantuan launch back in June of 2023. It's the first big game in the genre that is going to give Diablo 4, Path of Exile, and other smaller titles runs for their money, and it's already driving change in the upcoming sequel to PoE 1. Path of Exile 2, namely in the trade and respecking spheres of the game. The point being, Last Epoch is finally injecting a third megadose into the ARPG scene in terms of live service, seasonal games, hoping to stand tall with the likes of Diablo 4 and Path of Exile 1. It, just after D4's release and long before PoE 2's launch, is already invigorating the ARPG community and preparing it for a substantial renaissance in the coming years. This video explores the wild path Last Epoch took to get to this leg of its journey. A full launch on February 21st, 2024. It gathers the developers, analyzes the game's development, and tries not to compare it too much to its rivals. Instead, the video will showcase the features Last Epoch will release with and what was initially planned way back when 11th Hour Games began working full steam ahead on the game after its successful Kickstarter in 2018. Additionally, this video will summarize the community reception to Last Epoch and its imminent launch, before concluding what immediate, short-term, and long-term impact this next-gen ARPG will have on this genre many of us love to love and hate. Without further ado, let's dive into the depths of this video. 11th Hour Games is the game development studio fully behind Last Epoch, but how did it exactly form, and why is this a story we would like to know? Well, it all begins with Reddit. Actually, on Reddit. We begin this tale deep in the post history of Reddit user MoxJet200, also known as Judd Cobbler. Just after a few posts of his asking about budget bow builds during Path of Exile 2.6 for new players, and then how to get into PoE's endgame, note how quickly he was sucked in, Judd forged a post on the Delusional Artists subreddit titled "Looking for a fantasy artist for a passion project game." Yes, everyone, this is where Last Epoch began. It was the first real post by MoxJet200, aka Judd, aka the CEO and game director of 11th Hour Games and Last Epoch. From humble beginnings to rising flames, indeed. Not long after this initial post, Judd began slamming Reddit with post after post looking for more artists, passionate developers, and game designers eager to work on a passion project game, a new ARPG, the perfect ARPG, a Diablo 2-like ARPG, and the like. Steadily, he gathered a sizable team, with many people arriving from Reddit. Yes, it's true. Reddit can rock. Not long after Judd's first post on May 17th, 2017, the team announced their Kickstarter campaign for Last Epoch in January of 2018. The Kickstarter was set to go live on April 17th, 2018. The developers claimed inspiration from a few sources. Chrono Trigger for Last Epoch's story, it was going to be a time travel ARPG. For gameplay, Diablo. Path of Exile and Grim Dawn were also clear inspirations. The goal of this game was to kill monsters and get loot. Essentially, this was going to be a time travel hack and slash ARPG. The Kickstarter went live as planned with a super basic demo of the game. They had monsters, they had skills, they had some loot. Really, they had the skeleton of a game they sought to forge in the coming years. Thanks to the promising bare-bones gameplay, the passionate developers, and their relentless grassroots marketing, the campaign ended up raising over $250,000 across its month-long run. 11th Hour Games celebrated, collected their fundraising dollars, and got back to work. They began hiring more and more people, with plenty of posts again to Reddit. This game, unlike many game companies out there, was developed remotely, and that was a facet of the job Judd and others advertised greatly when looking for artists, designers, animators, programmers, and other roles. About a year after the game's Kickstarter, Last Epoch's beta went into early access on Steam in April 2019. Through this beta, plenty of players tried out the game and helped build up the game. The developers kept a close relationship with the community, running their own subreddit, commonly streaming the game, answering questions, and establishing an incredibly clear dev cross-consumer collaborative relationship. It was a super positive time, and despite delays, that has stretched all the way to the present. Last Epoch originally planned to launch its 1.0 version in April 2020. That was pushed and pushed and pushed to where it landed in the present, February 2024. During that time, the development team grew to more than 50 people. 11th Hour Games secured a low equity investment from Tencent, and the ambitious game blossomed. With tremendous help from the rabid and dedicated early access community, the 11th Hour Games team constructed a fully fleshed out ARPG ready to compete with the titans like Path of Exile 1 and Diablo 4, rife with content and features that rival even the former game, a title that has been out for over a decade. That's how you release a game in the current age, with a thoughtful, content-rich and transparent development cycle, and a whole host of great game features. Oh yeah, so what features is Last Epoch launching with? Well, we should realize the game is launching with the most robust set of features of an ARPG launch in history. But before we discuss that fully, I would like to ask, if you are enjoying this video, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. First and foremost, Last Epoch is defined as a loot-based action role-playing game, yet there's a whole host of depth beyond that initial easy definition. This game sets itself apart from others in the space in a few concise and biting ways. Rising above almost every other feature in this day and age is the initial quality of life standards Last Epoch boasts. Let us just list off a few huge ones so we know what type of game and developer we're dealing with. We have limitless stash tabs purchased using in-game gold. We have item filters built into the game we can fully customize in the game too. We have an inventory sorting button. We automatically pick up all crafting components in an area when we click on one. We have in-game instant trading. We have deterministic systems when gaining loot ourselves. We can respec our skills with the only cost being the experience gained by said skills. There are no other limits on this. And we can play in an offline mode if we would like. And really, that's just the greatest hits of Last Epoch's quality of life features. More exist, and surely, once a slew of new players join the world of Atera, more will be created due to player requests. Then there's the class system of Last Epoch. There are 5 base classes: the Mage, the Rogue, the Primalist, the Acolyte, and the Sentinel. Each class has a set of skills attached to it, a class-specific small passive skill tree, certain items only they can equip, and 3 masteries they can specialize in at a certain level. These masteries also come with new skills and a new skill tree the same size or larger than the base class skill tree. For Path of Exile players, these are essentially far bigger and deeper ascendancy classes. Next up is Last Epoch's skill system, which is intuitive, beautiful, and contains more than 100 skills at the launch of the game. On our characters, we can specialize in a certain number of skills. Once we specialize in a skill, we gain a skill tree for the skill. That's right. Every single skill in the game has its own unique skill tree, and the nodes on said tree aren't meaningless and bloated. The nodes completely alter how each skill works, creates cool new combos, and allows for easy, limitless respecking. The only limit with skills is class, as each class has a set of skills attached to it, and its masteries, but there's a huge number of potential combinations and creative builds available with all these skills. Now, what's the next part of our characters? The loot and the items that lay in those big loot piles. Items in Last Epoch are quite meaningful, rich with key modifiers, intuitive tiering, and various item classes. Last Epoch does have set items, which might lead to homogeneity between some builds, but there are also deeper systems surrounding uniques, legendaries, and crafting that allow players to truly improve and hone their build to a great extent. It's definitely a middle ground between Diablo 4 and Path of Exile, leaning toward Path of Exile in terms of item complexity, but completely smashing PoE in terms of intuitiveness when it comes to crafting. As we construct our builds and amass our powerful items, we enter Last Epoch's 3 primary endgame systems: the Monolith of Fate, the Dungeons, and the Arena. In the Monolith of Fate, Last Epoch's hyper-repeatable endgame mapping system, we enter alternate timelines and explore echoes of events that may have been. These timelines are constructible by us, gaining new modifiers both positive and negative as we clear each echo. Eventually, we find new timelines, battle big bosses, and reconstruct the fate of Eterra over and over, with corruption mounting as we do so. Then there are dungeons, repeatable forms of content that each have special rewards attached to them that cycle depending on the time of the month. These aren't as modular as the Monolith, but their rewards can be substantial and relate heavily to our characters depending on when we decide to run them. Using dungeons, we can also skip chapters in the campaign on subsequent characters. Currently, Last Epoch has 3 dungeons: the Lightless Arbor, the Soulfire Bastion, and the Temporal Sanctum. The Soulfire Bastion's unique reward, for example, is a high-risk, high-reward gambling system in which we can likely receive excellent gear for current and future characters using gold. Then there's the Arena, a never-ending battle in which we face hordes of enemies, choose to continue on our retreat after each wave, and, if we're powerful enough, earn a spot on the Arena leaderboard. That's right, Last Epoch is launching with an actual leaderboard in-game. Just let that sink in, ARPG fans and current game news enjoyers. Finally, let's briefly touch on Last Epoch's story and world before we hop on over to the timeline of its community reception. Last Epoch is a game about time travel. Its campaign sees us swapping between multiple times and locations throughout its broad world. This is ambitious, and at times it can become a bit much, but it's a vision clearly defined by the developer at the beginning of the game's life and seen all the way to completion. The setting of Last Epoch's endgame is fascinating and an incredibly clever concept. We won't spoil it blatantly here. You'll need to play the game to find out where or when you'll be. Now. Since Judd pulled together some hungry Redditors way back when, how has the community received this upcoming ARPG? It has been a bumpy, delayed road. Since Last Epoch's massively successful Kickstarter campaign in 2018, it has drummed up a small but passionate following. In the months leading up to its official 1.0 launch, the crowd eagerly anticipating the game has multiplied. Back in 2018, not many players had access to Last Epoch. A small demo was available upon the game's Kickstarter campaign start, but it was incredibly bare. To many, it oozed potential, and that's what led the campaign to mount an impressive $250,000+ run. Huge. 2019 rolled around and finally more people were able to play the game. 11th Hour Games released Last Epoch into beta via Steam's early access program in April. Initially, plenty of players thought the game was janky and could use tons of improvements in almost every area of the game. Some enjoyed it, but others heavily criticized it and were open with the developers, who begged for constructive, critical feedback. As we've seen, they took the feedback and ran with it in a positive manner. 2020 was supposed to be the year for Last Epoch's 1.0 release, but as many other games, events, and lives across the world, it was delayed due to a widespread event I shall not name on YouTube. Sorry, I seek to please the hidden YouTube overlords. The community was disappointed at first, but quickly understood this was for the best. EHG, an indie studio, did not want to risk their entire livelihoods just to push out a game by a date set of their own accord. Players wanted EHG to cook, and cook they did. In 2021 and 2022, development continued. The cult following of Last Epoch built higher and higher, ensuring when the game did launch, it would have an avid player base to prop it up. However, in March 2022, a bit of controversy hit EHG when Tencent made a low equity investment into the studio and therefore Last Epoch. The developers pitched this as a completely positive thing. Tencent wouldn't control any decisions and would provide massive financial resources for the studio, which would guarantee the stability of their current development pipeline through the full 1.0 release of Last Epoch, allow funds for required hardware like more testing machines and server infrastructure to support multiplayer, allow EHG to hire and contract industry experts and consultants for the most challenging aspects of development and live ops, and allow EHG to expand their team. All of this meant EHG would be stable and be able to grow as a studio for years to come. The fervor eventually died down, and the passion only continued to pour out from the devs into Last Epoch's development. So curious though, Tencent now has equity in both Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile, alongside 11th Hour Games and Last Epoch. They got in early with EHG though. 2023 was again supposed to be the final push for Last Epoch's 1.0 release. It's when I began to play, and I truly came to love the game. However, due to some other unfortunate game release timings and EHG's desire to further fix and polish their product, the game's launch was moved to 2024. Hey, that's where we are now. People truly respected the developer's decision. Instead of rushing out an unfinished product and trying to meet the deadline they again artificially set for themselves, they communicated a delay was needed, implemented the delay, and set a new firm date. In the build up to that date, they ramped up marketing to new levels. They released an incredible cinematic trailer, blasting anything Path of Exile has ever done cinematically out of the void. Heck, it even rivals Diablo cinematics. They innovated how trade works in ARPGs, and they iterated on their graphical improvements even more, ensuring Last Epoch was going to be pristine upon launch. They worked with huge ARPG communities like Maxroll, and even teamed up with people like Gazi and Darth Microtransaction to build up hype for their game. True fans, big gaming celebrities. A refreshing approach. Sure, there were some hiccups with the Warlock, Icy Veins, and Aaron RPG, but stuff happens. And to close out the path to launch, they released an absolutely lit technical trailer outlining all 15 masteries, focusing on the gameplay of Last Epoch first and foremost. Now, that's how you set up an ARPG release in 2024. Other studios should take notes. All this time, the community for Last Epoch continued to grow, get excited, and nearly overload due to breached hype levels in anticipation for 1.0's release. And why wouldn't they? I am incredibly hyped for Last Epoch. I hope, given this history of 11th Hour Games, Last Epoch, and its road to launch, we all are. This is an exciting time to be an ARPG enjoyer, my friends. This is also just a rad story. A dude wants to design a game, so he goes on Reddit, asks people to help him out, and eventually constructs a game that will rival established IPs like Diablo on its launch day. How wild is that? Judd Cobbler's dream is one big challenge away from becoming a reality. It's a moment he and the rest of 11th Hour Games has probably been awaiting for quite some time now. Launch day is going to be interesting. The hype surrounding Last Epoch is immense. With Diablo 4's launch in June of last year, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new players were brought into the ARPG genre. Many of them will likely be hopping into Last Epoch on February 21st. Then, there are all the titanic streamers and content creators who will be bringing their audiences to Itera. Asmongold has been promising to try this game for years now, and he has vowed he will be there on launch day, alongside the rest of us. I'm taking him at his word. I think he'll make it. Then there are others. The new biggest gaming creator of the last year, Darth Microtransaction, ARPG staples like Riker and Quinn69, and probably every other person who has tried Diablo, Path of Exile, or any of the other ARPGs released in the past decade. Plenty of their followers will try out Last Epoch alongside them. The servers are going to be facing a horde of fiery barbarians at the gates. Let's hope they are strong, steadfast, and properly cooled on launch day. If you have not already, go pick up Last Epoch on Steam and prepare for its launch day on February 21st, 2024. And if the game has already launched, go grab it now and join me inside of it. Welcome to Itera, traveler. Last Epoch is a game best played without a guide, especially on the first run through. While it's more complex than Diablo 4 and not as convoluted as Path of Exile, it still harbors great depth and rewards us with clever but simple character creation. Not convinced? Watch this quick video about exactly this.